America and China are in a new nuclear arms race. But this time, it's different.
We have an energy shortage in America.
China is outpacing the United States by at least a decade in developing nuclear power.
If American companies don't lead on this, then the jobs, the wealth won't develop here, they'll develop in China.
The United States is currently the world's leading nuclear energy producer, with 94 operational reactors across the country. But things are changing fast. China now operates 58 reactors. It's building 150 more in just the next 10 years, and its technology is already years ahead of any other nation. This could mark a historic decline in America's global power. Throughout history, whoever has controlled energy has controlled the future, and never has this been more true than today. By 2050, the world is expecting to use nearly double the energy it does today. AI, electric vehicles, quantum computing, robotics, the technologies that will define the 21st century, all need unfathomable amounts of energy, but America's grid can't keep up. According to a recent report, the US will need to expand its power generation by as much as 50% by 2040 just to meet demand. Yet, with current infrastructure and projects in the pipeline, it's only on track to grow by around 20%. If the backbone of American industry can't supply enough power, it doesn't matter how advanced their technology is. Progress stalls, costs rise, and competitors surge ahead. The only energy source capable of filling this gap and doing it quickly is nuclear. But here's the thing. In the last 50 years, America has successfully built just 2 nuclear plants, and despite trying to regain its build-out, it's currently building precisely 0. While America has spent decades trapped in political gridlock, each administration reversing the last, China has scaled with ruthless efficiency, and it's about to reach an inflection point. This is the story of one of the most important races of the 21st century, one which could define the future of global power. So what exactly is happening in the new nuclear arms race? And if America can catch up, will it already be too late? In many ways, human progress is tied directly to the types of energy we use. Before the Industrial Revolution, we relied on the sun for heat, animals for agriculture and transportation, and water and wind to power simple machines. Coal powered the first industrial steam engines, which in turn powered the first trains, factories, and electric generators. And by the late 1800s, petroleum, processed into gasoline, fueled the internal combustion engines on the first cars. And in World War II, we discovered, painfully, the immense energy of the atom. But what if that same power could also light cities instead of destroy them? Instead of weapons, the US government quickly realized the unbounded potential to use nuclear to produce electricity, and America quickly made plans to build around 250 power plants across the country. There was also another driving factor in this. At the time, this was more than just an energy project. It was a race with America's old rival, the Soviet Union. They were competing not only for military dominance, but for technological supremacy in nuclear power. And it wasn't hard to see why. Nuclear is powerful, clean, and efficient on a scale that no other energy source can match. A single plant could power entire cities without choking the sky in smoke, and it used less land than anything else, 60 times more efficient than solar, and more than 100 times better than hydropower. And that ominous-looking gas rising from its cooling towers is actually water vapor. Even more remarkable, a single pellet of uranium, no bigger than your thumb, could produce as much energy as a ton of coal or 100 barrels of oil, and much of its waste can even be recycled into more power. From the bow and arrow to the steam engine to the microchip, every leap in technology has come from a leap in energy, and in economics, one pattern is almost universal. When nations consume more energy, their wealth rises with it. Energy isn't just power, it's prosperity. America's early success in nuclear made it a clear leader around the world, which makes what happened next even more baffling. In 1973, as America was entering its nuclear golden age, several Arab nations banned oil exports to countries that supported Israel, including the United States and much of Western Europe. In a matter of months, the price of oil quadrupled, and for the first time, industrialized nations realized how vulnerable they were. With energy prices soaring, nuclear power yet again seemed like the perfect solution. Efficient, reliable, and independent of foreign oil. And a second oil crisis in 1979 only strengthened that argument. But just a few months later, everything suddenly changed. In March 1979, a reactor core at the 3 Mile Island nuclear plant in Pennsylvania was partially melted by a simple mechanical failure. America had had its first nuclear accident, and although it resulted in no deaths, no harm to the environment, and no health effects due to radiation, the media blew the story out of proportion.
It was the first step in a nuclear nightmare.
Anti-nuclear demonstrators marched downtown and filled Market Square.
Death is as close as our nearest nuclear reactor.
The 3 Mile Island plant was quickly shut down, and public trust in nuclear power was shattered.
More than half of the people surveyed changed their opinion about whether more nuclear power plants should be constructed.
After this accident, the government introduced a barrage of new regulations to make nuclear plants safer. But this also made it exponentially more difficult, time-consuming and expensive to build and operate them. For example, Unit 2 of the Watts Bay nuclear plant in Tennessee began construction in 1973, but after many design changes, delays and cost overruns, it only became operational in 2016. 43 years later. Now, at the time, America had already built or started building a total of 130 reactors, but after these changes, many active projects were abandoned. Dozens of uranium mines and refineries shut down across the country, and all plans to build new reactors were cancelled. Just like that, America's opportunity to fully master one of the world's most groundbreaking technologies and solve its energy problem for good came to a halt. And fear travels fast. Across the Atlantic, the panic spread through Europe. Countries like Germany and Italy, which had once bet their future on nuclear power, began to pull back. And then came the moment that defined the public's perception of nuclear forever.
Soviet nuclear accident in the Ukraine created fallout today.
The Soviet Union has suffered
the worst accident in the short history of the world's nuclear power industry.
In 1986, a reactor at the Chernobyl power plant in Soviet Ukraine exploded, releasing massive amounts of radiation across Europe. Like in America, public opinion turned against nuclear, and Europe's nuclear build-out also came to a halt. Just like that, the West had abandoned nuclear. For the first time since the Industrial Revolution, progress in energy had stopped. But while one half of the world was paralysed by fear, the other saw an opening. China was just getting started. In the late 1970s, China had begun rapidly industrializing in an effort to modernize its economy. With the benefit of hindsight, it's clear how differently the two sides of the world thought about progress. While you may put it down to good fortune, as the West was trapped in short-term fear, China was thinking in generations. Or as Deng Xiaoping, the father of modern China, put it, "To get rich is glorious, but to stay rich, you must think in centuries." That long-term mindset has defined China's rise. China has modernized fast because it had energy. Most importantly, an enormous supply of coal. Cheap, reliable, but dirty. And this came with consequences. Look at these two pictures of the city Liaoning. That's not fog on the left. It's air pollution from the open coal pit mines nearby, including the largest in Asia. But this wasn't even the main concern to the government at the time. China's oil and natural gas reserves are not nearly large enough to meet its energy needs, and even its coal supply is not infinite. Today, the country still gets most of its energy from coal, but its current reserves will only last another 35 years. Simply put, China needed another source of energy, and it already knew this back in the 1980s. If coal had powered its rise, nuclear would have to power its future. So as it grew, it started a massive nuclear build-out. China's first reactor began construction in 1984, and it was connected to the electrical grid in 1991. By that point in the US, only 2 reactors were being built, and they were from the 70s. In fact, there wasn't a single new construction project for the entirety of the 80s, 90s, or 2000s. Meanwhile, China followed its first reactor with dozens more, as well as a comprehensive build-out of the nuclear supply chain, including mines, refineries, and universities at the cutting edge of nuclear research. Now, America still dwarfed China in energy output and technological development, but it wasn't building, and if it didn't start soon, it could fall behind. 2 decades passed, and America was still stuck at the same number of plants. So in 2010, the Obama administration announced the plan to build a new wave of American nuclear plants. Long term, the plan was to jumpstart a new nuclear renaissance in America and build dozens of new reactors. It was a bold plan, but unfortunately, it failed. In 2011, a massive earthquake off the coast of Japan caused the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant to malfunction and release massive amounts of radiation into the atmosphere and the Pacific Ocean. The accident sent shockwaves across the world. One accident halfway around the world was enough to bring Washington's entire plan crashing down. Of the dozens of new plants planned by the Obama administration, only 2 were ever built. However, Fukushima did not slow China down. It just kept building. And today, it's starting to pay off. China is now outpacing America in basically every front when it comes to nuclear energy. It currently operates 58 reactors, which does put them in second place when compared to America's 94. But in just the coming decade, China plans to more than quadruple its nuclear fleet, dwarfing the US as the world's nuclear energy leader. It's currently building 33 new reactors. It has approved plans for 43 more, and an additional 147 have been proposed. And it wouldn't be surprising that if by the time this video is uploaded, those numbers are higher. By comparison, America is currently building 0 new reactors. It has no approved plans, and only 25 have been proposed. And in the whole of the European Union, there is only a single reactor under construction in Slovakia. And some countries, like Germany and Italy, have completely stopped operating theirs. But it's not just how many reactors China is building, it's how efficiently it's building them. The more China builds, the cheaper it gets. This chart shows the construction costs of nuclear reactors in the US and China. In America, costs have exploded over time, from around $1 per watt in the 1970s to as much as $15 today. But in China, the opposite has happened. Costs have steadily fallen as the country's built more and learned faster. When you build dozens of plants using the same designs, the same parts, and the same teams, every project gets cheaper and faster. Engineers learn from mistakes, supply chains get tighter, construction timelines shrink. Costs fall not because the technology changes, but because repetition does what it always does in manufacturing. It drives efficiency. And it's not like America doesn't understand this principle. It mastered it a century ago. From Ford's assembly lines to the mass production of aircraft and ships in World War II. But when it comes to nuclear, that mindset never took hold. Every plant became a bespoke project instead of part of a much larger system. Now, the West knows this is a problem, so in 2023, America and more than 20 other countries joined a pledge to triple their nuclear energy capacity by 2050. The year after, Congress passed a bill aiming to make it easier to build new nuclear infrastructure in America. However, just building more may not be enough. A new report on China's innovation in nuclear power has come to some alarming conclusions. The headline stat is that China recently began operating the world's first 4th-generation nuclear reactor, and it claims to have developed over 90% of the technology independently. According to the report, China's ability to build this kind of reactor is likely 10 to 15 years ahead of America's. But this isn't the only technology they're dominating in. The report also claims that China is winning the race to develop small modular reactors, or SMRs, which will be vital for AI. Think of SMRs as cheaper, shrunken down versions of a typical nuclear reactor that could be mass-produced in factories and basically deployed anywhere. China and Russia already have SMRs in operation, and they're building more. The potential to use them in AI data centers is enormous, so companies like Google and Amazon have poured billions into SMR research. And this is really the crux of America's approach versus China. Instead of a coordinated national strategy, America is leaning heavily on private innovation. Dozens of startups are racing to develop a new generation of smaller, cheaper reactors. Tech giants like Google, Amazon, and OpenAI are investing billions into companies like Kairos Power, X Energy, and Oiko, all hoping one day to power the AI data centers with nuclear energy. Projects are already underway in Wyoming, Texas, and Tennessee, but few, if any, new reactors are expected before the 2030s. And some analysts warn that the US is betting too heavily on technological breakthroughs instead of rebuilding the financing, skills, and industrial base needed to actually construct reactors at scale. America, for instance, has lost almost all of its heavy forging capacity, the massive equipment used to build key reactor components, and these designs could take years, maybe decades to perfect. At its core, this is about two completely different systems. America's economy is built on financialization, markets, private capital, and incentives for innovation, whereas China's is built on coordination, state-backed funding, long-term planning, and control over every link of the industrial chain. In America, capital flows where the profit is highest. In China, it flows where strategy demands. To make things worse, China is also squarely in the lead when it comes to thorium reactors. Thorium is safer and far more abundant than uranium, and theoretically it could yield up to 200 times more usable energy. China already has an operational thorium prototype. It's small and not yet connected to the grid, but it works, and their plans to scale it commercially are already underway. The US isn't even close, and that brings us to the next frontier, nuclear fusion. If China wins this race, it wouldn't just dominate the energy market, it could reshape civilization. And if there's one technology that could turn China into the world's dominant superpower, it's this. Fusion is like the holy grail of energy. Unlike fission, which splits atoms, fusion combines them. The same process that powers the sun. In theory, it could give humanity a limitless source of clean energy, enough to power out species for millions, even billions of years. For now, China and the West are neck and neck in this research. But here's the difference. When that breakthrough does finally arrive, or if it does, China is in a far better position to build fast and scale even faster. Its system has already proven it can turn technology into infrastructure. China's nuclear expansion isn't without its risks. One of its plants suffered a minor leak in 2021, and there's still no permanent plan for waste storage. And protests have erupted in some cities over new facilities, and Beijing has even paused new projects in water-scarce regions. But those are just speed bumps, not stop signs. The country is still barreling ahead, planning hundreds of new reactors by mid-century. America is not oblivious to this. In 2024, the US Department of Energy estimated that by 2050 it would need to triple its nuclear energy capacity just to meet its needs and net zero emission targets. But when Donald Trump took office in 2025, he declared a national energy emergency.
I will also declare a national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill.
His headline solution is to drill, baby, drill, which refers to America's oil and natural gas reserves. But this approach applies to nuclear as well. One of his first actions as president was to sign 4 executive orders to, quote, unleash a nuclear renaissance and quadruple America's nuclear capacity, more than the Department of Energy thinks it will need. The president also has struck a deal to accelerate the construction of nuclear power plants in both the US and the UK. So clearly, America is moving again. But the path ahead is not going to be easy. America's domestic nuclear energy supply chain is practically non-existent. Right now, the only supplier for high-grade uranium to power the SMRs is Russia. And China's dominance in manufacturing means it has large control over global supply chains. If it wanted to, it could easily disrupt America's ability to build nuclear infrastructure. Now, the Trump administration has taken steps to start rebuilding, but it's going to take decades. However, America has an even bigger problem that simply might be impossible to solve. This is where American capitalism and Chinese central planning come to a head. Each system has its pros and cons. For example, when it comes to nuclear fusion research, the Chinese government is outspending the US government, but America has attracted far more private funding, so in total, its spending is 3 times more. But when it comes to building reactors, the part that actually matters, capitalism fails. In America, nuclear power plants take over a decade to build and almost always run over budget. Westinghouse, for example, one of America's biggest energy companies, actually went bankrupt in 2017 when the costs for a reactor they were building went from $14 to $34 billion. It's easy to see why investors seeking short-term returns want nothing to do with nuclear. It's simply too risky. But with China's centralized model, the state controls financing and construction, and it doesn't answer to shareholders. If Beijing decides to build a reactor gets built, and they've decided to build hundreds. Simply put, China can and does do long-term thinking. That's why over the last 50 years, while China has laid the foundations for a nuclear golden age, America has fallen behind, and it's barely starting to move again. By every conceivable measure, China is crushing America in the race for nuclear power. And it's not slowing down. They're growing faster, they're more efficient, they have better technology, a complete supply chain, and perhaps most importantly, they can just get shit done. If nuclear really is the holy grail of energy, perhaps it's time to start asking, what does the world look like when America is number 2? Because it's not much of a race if China is driving a supercar and the United States is in a wheelchair.